ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Hello, Sarah here, sharing some of my favourite guests from Conversations. This time it's my conversation with the late singer-songwriter John Prine. John Prine started out as a mailman in Chicago, but he was always writing songs on the side. And after playing a few open mic nights in folk clubs, he ditched the mailbag and started making music full-time. In 50 years or so of songwriting, his subjects never changed much. Men and women, getting married, getting divorced, leaving home, coming home, as well as songs about fishing, about Jesus, and about getting old. Right from John's earliest shows, other musicians saw something special in his music. When John died in 2020, Bruce Springsteen paid tribute to his friend, saying he wrote music of towering compassion with an almost unheard of precision and creativity. Bob Dylan, meanwhile, praised John's music as pure Proustian existentialism. I recorded this conversation with John Prine back in 2019 during his last Australian tour for his album Tree of Forgiveness. Hi John, welcome to Conversations.
Thank you, it's nice to be here.
Why a new album after so long?
Actually, that's what I was asking myself. My wife Fiona is my manager now, and my longtime manager Al Bonetta passed away suddenly about 5 years ago, and our son Jody took over. I've got my own record company in the U.S., and he took over running the record company, and the two of them came to me about a year and a half ago and said, "It's time for you to make a record." I said, "What do you mean? I just made one." And the last one was 2006, right? And I just hadn't realized it all, because mainly I make my living on the road. You know, if my refrigerator breaks down, I go to Kansas City and YOLO for 2 hours, and I got a new refrigerator. So everything was going so good on the road, and we actually were picking up a younger audience these last 10 years. It just never occurred to me. I thought I'd made a record 5 years ago.
You didn't mind playing the old songs again and again?
Actually, no, because I can't play but so many of them in 2 hours. And after 50 years, there's a good bundle of songs. There's not many songs I wouldn't sing of the old ones.
So once your wife and your son tapped you on the shoulder and said, time for a new album, how did you go about writing it?
Well, they knew that I don't work well at home, and I have an office, but I never go there. Me and Sturgill Simpson have a writing office, and we have never written a song together.
What do you do in there instead?
I shoot pool there. I got a pool table. It's a place to keep my pool table because I don't have a room in the house big enough for it. And I go there and shoot pool and think about writing songs. But what they did was Jody, our son, and Fiona booked me a suite at the Omni in Nashville, which is connected to the Country Music Hall of Fame. They know I like to go hang out there. And they put 10 boxes of unfinished lyrics, 4 guitars and a ukulele, and just put me in there to the mercy of room service for a week.
Locked you up.
And, it worked. I stay up like pretty late when I'm writing. I'm like writing during the day. I'm more like a vampire. And I came out of there a week later with 10 songs.
One week is all it takes for you to write 10 songs.
No, they were there already, and I didn't know it. I just had to piece them together. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, really.
So you say you like writing at night, John. What does that mean for your days at that hotel? How do you fill your time?
I sleep late and walked around over in the Country Music Hall of Fame and knocked around in downtown Nashville. When I'm at home and not in a hotel, I usually make myself scarce between 1 in the afternoon, and I come home at 4:30, just like as if I was a working man.
And what are you doing?
I just stay away from home, so it looks like I'm working. I just drive around and go have lunch with a buddy, and go look at cars, and then go home and like, whew, what a hard day I had.
I'm home, honey. I've done my work for the day. How do you know when you're working on a song? Is there a part of you that clicks into, it's done now, it's ready?
There is. A lot of times I can write when I'm driving. You have to really be doing something to connect with the part of your mind that like lets you write. You know, you kind of have to close off half of it. I was talking to Tyler Childers is opening the shows for us. He's really great. He's coming along really fast and furious. And Tyler told me that he wrote a couple of his favorite songs on that first record he did. He was taking a bicycle apart, and about 100 little ball bearings fell out on the floor. And he was down his hands and knees picking up those ball bearings, and all of a sudden, he started writing songs. You know, you have to be concentrating on something. Maybe I should keep a jar of ball bearings around, you know.
As you say, you spend a lot of time on the road, a lot of time touring. That must mean you're pretty good at packing a suitcase by now, then.
Oh, my God, no. If I go 30 miles from home and from Nashville, I take the same amount of clothes I brought to Australia. You know, I have 3 bags, and when I go through customs, it looks like I'm a haberdasher and I'm going to sell all these suits, you know, while I'm here. And they got all kinds of questions for me when I go through customs.
I'm not sure I would have picked you as a clothes horse, John.
I'm not. I mean, I wear the same stuff every day. I got black shirt, black pants, black socks, you know. But I have all these things as if I was going to get invited to the royal wedding or something, yeah.
You've got options.
Right.
So Nashville is home for you now. What do you like about living there?
Well, liked is the thing. When I moved there, Nashville is rapidly changing. It is the fastest growing city in the U.S. 100 people per day are moving there. And it was always a big little town. That's what I liked about it. You could go downtown and mess around, and rush hour lasted about 15 minutes. You know, so if you just found something else to do, you wouldn't get caught in it. But now it's got all the big city trappings, and they're building high-rises left and right downtown. Nobody ever lived downtown in Nashville. It was just a place to go to a honky-tonk or something. And now it's just totally different, you know. But Fiona and I raised our kids there, and it's home.
Is it still a place that you can stumble across a new musician or find something in a bar you haven't heard before?
Definitely. I mean, that was one of the things that really appealed to me when I first moved there. I was already settled in the music business. I didn't move there for my career, and I was a big country fan. It was time for me to get out of Chicago. So I moved down there, and I always was kind of fond of Nashville anyway. But after I moved there, you go to the grocery store, and I would meet the guy bagging groceries would be a songwriter, and the girl checking you out would be a singer. And I'd walk out of there, they'd drop cassettes in my pocket. You know, and I thought, this is like the old movies in Hollywood when people get off the train and go, you know, Hollywood, I'm gonna get you, you know. And by golly, there's been people that I've met the first week or so they've been in town. I wished them good luck, and I'll be darned if a couple of years later they didn't have a hit song, or somebody recorded their song, or I met Casey Musgraves the first couple of weeks she was in town. And look at her now, you know.
As you say, you grew up in Chicago, but that's not where your mum and dad were from. What part of America had they grown up in?
They were from western Kentucky, and which is only 100 miles north of Nashville. It was always difficult to get work there, you know, unless you wanted to work in the mines, or if your father had an actual business, like he was a shoemaker or tailor, you know. Otherwise, you had to leave there to get a job. My dad left there in the 30s and went up to Chicago and got factory work. And a lot of his cousins went up to Detroit to work in the car factories. And then they would send for, after they got settled, they would send for other relatives to come up. But we were settled in there, but my father in particular raised me and my 3 brothers as if we were from Kentucky, even though we were born and raised in Chicago.
What did that mean? What did that look like?
He just missed it. When he would take us down there as kids, you could see it in his eyes. He just became a teenager again, you know, and that was the place where he really became alive, was in Kentucky. And we all kind of, I'll give you an example. I remember in elementary school, like about third grade, they asked us to go home and ask what our heritage was. And so like the little girl in front of me goes, she said she was Swedish and Irish or whatever, you know, and they're coming on down the line. I'd asked my dad after he had a couple of beers, and I stood up and said, I'm pure Kentuckian, the last of a dying breed. Yeah.
When you would go there as a kid, John, what did it look like? What's the landscape around that part of Kentucky?
It used to be beautiful. It was kind of untouched. And there's always been coal there, and there's always been coal mines. But what happened was in the late 60s, the coal company came in and decided they were working for the Tennessee Valley Authority. And they came in and they strip mined the area, which it looks like a moonscape, you know. And they did that for about 15 years. They had the world's largest steam shovel. They brought it in piece by piece on the river. And when they were done 15 years later, they couldn't afford to take the shovel apart, so they buried it. Actually, the shovel buried itself. And I heard about 100 people attended the funeral, and they all sang my song, Paradise.
When you would go back there as a kid, is that where you started fishing?
Oh, yeah, actually, on the Green River. Everybody fished the Green River. And our dad would take us out, you know, and he used to, we knew this fellow that lived there. His name was Bubby Short. Bubby was the only black man within about 50 miles. And he lived in Paradise. And he could come up with catfish in a hot second. And my dad would tell our mother that he was going to take us over to Paradise to go fishing. And he'd just take a 6-pack of beer and trade it for 6 big catfish. And we'd come back, and our dad would go in the ice bucket and bring out all these fish to our mother when he came home, as if we were fishing all day.
That's clever. That's clever fishing.
Yeah, I think that's how I got my idea of fishing, too.
So you'd go on holiday with your family to Kentucky, but Chicago was home. What kind of place was Maywood to grow up in?
Maywood was your all-American little town. So it was one of the older suburbs in Chicago. Our neighborhood had Hispanics. It was about 45% black, and people from rural South, mainly because of the factories in Maywood. And so I was kind of figured that later on, when I got to traveling around and got in the Army and then hit the road as a musician, a lot of people weren't able to grow up around so many different people. And when they finally did, they kind of took old ways about it, you know. But I always thought it was a good environment to grow up in. And we grew up on a 4-lane highway before there was the interstates. So we got all the traffic. And my bedroom faced that 4-lane. And I used to lay in bed at night, listen to those trucks roll by. And I'd dream about I wanted to grow up to be a truck driving logger. And I'd hear those trucks going by, and that meant the open road to me. Like, you know, I thought that's you drive a big silver truck, and when somebody needs a logger, you just hop out of the truck. And
it's got legs, that idea.
Like the Lone Ranger logger. Yeah.
And were you looking and checking out cars as well?
I always liked cars, except the cars now, they kill me. I mean, you can't tell one car from another, you know. Some of the more expensive ones you can, but back when I was a kid, 2 blocks away, I could tell you, just from looking at the headlights or the taillights, what kind of car that was. So I still like old cars. I don't have enough room for them.
You need another office.
I need a big office, like a warehouse, for a snooker table and
couple of cars.
Yeah.
So when you were a kid, John, which kind of car did you dream of owning one day?
Wow, that's a good question. Probably my dad's car, which wasn't much, you know. It was a 53 Plymouth. He got a new car, not a new car, he got a different car about every 4 years. Some of them weren't, they were better looking than they ran. I remember he had a 49 Hudson, and I was with him one night. We went to pick my older brother up from a job, and the car actually blew up. The engine blew up, and the gas pedal stuck to the floor. And instead of pulling over, my dad was down on the floor trying to pull the gas pedal. Nobody was steering the car. We were going by an old cemetery, and the car started to sputter down to about 15 miles an hour. I did something stupid. I did something I'd seen in the movies. I opened the door and rolled out into a ditch and landed right next to a gravestone. Well, I thought that was going to be the end of it that night. Yeah.
They could have just put up your tombstone there. You'd saved half the trouble.
Really, yeah. And here I thought you could just, roll out of a car, like, just get up and dust yourself off.
Not like the movies.
No.
So how big a part was music in your mum and dad's life?
Both of them loved music, particularly country music. And we had really, Chicago was such a big city that it always had a couple of really good country stations. And then on weekends, my dad could get the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville. He used to take this old Zenith radio, and we'd sit in the kitchen, and he'd prop the window open and face the radio towards the south. I don't know if he had to go to those extremes.
What do you remember listening to when that radio was playing on the weekend?
Hank Sr., oh man, Webb Pierce. Webb Pierce was king then. He had about 3 hits in the top 10, it seemed like, all year long. And Roy Acuff, the Smoky Mountain Boys, Bill Monroe, Bluegrass Boys. It was all going on.
Did your dad or mum go and see live music, or was it the radio?
Yeah, they took us to, when you'd get a country show in Chicago, you would get about 25 acts, all singing their hits. They took us to one big show where Johnny Cash, George Jones and Tammy Wynette, Bill Monroe. I mean, you had it all in one show, Ernest Tubb. Really, really great, because they needed to kind of pack together to fill up a big arena, But we saw some really good ones. My brother Doug took me to see Ray Charles in 1961 when he had the country and western record out. Man, that really made an impact on me.
Well, as you're saying, I mean, Chicago was the home of so much different kind of music, blues and soul and country. Why was it country that grabbed you?
Because of my mother and father, I'm sure.
There are lots of kids who rebel against their mum and dad's taste in music, though, John.
Yeah, I never did that. I mean, I really liked it. I'd hear my mother singing in the kitchen when she was cooking or, cleaning the house, and she'd always be singing an old country song. And she had a pretty voice. You could never tell her that. She would get mad at you and chase you out of the room. But my dad couldn't sing a note, but he didn't care. I had seen that man stand on a table in a restaurant and sing the Wabash Cannonball.
When did you first pick up a guitar?
When I was 14. Me and my buddy lived across the street from me, Mickey Bowie. Mickey and I got guitars for Christmas, and I had a really pretty one called, the model was called Kentucky Blue. It was blue with a cream heart on it, and Mickey had a blonde guitar, and we didn't know how to play anything. We would play 1 or 2 strings. We'd play Rebel Rouser, Peter Gunn, stuff like that. It only took 2 strings to play it on. And about maybe a year later, my oldest brother, Dave, had taught himself how to play guitar. And he also wanted to teach himself how to play fiddle. And he needed somebody to play rhythm guitar so he could squeak and squawk on the fiddle. And he chose me. And he taught me 3 chords and gave me a Carter Family record. And that's kind of how I got into folk music. Before that, it was all country and rock and roll to me. And but Dave introduced me to all these different old folk singers, and he liked country, but he liked old-timey country and bluegrass and stuff. And because I could do it, that's how I got interested in it. And the next thing I knew was when I tried to learn all the words, like to a Carter Family song or something, I can only remember the first verse. So it was easier for me to make up my own words. And just, I couldn't play melodies very good, so by the time I learned melody, it came out like my own melody, yeah. And that's kind of how I got started. It was truly a hobby to me. I never harbored any sort of ambitions thinking that I could grow up in Maywood and become a recording artist, you know. I just thought that didn't happen to people like me.
One thing I really love in country songs is where they have that part in the middle or even at the beginning where the singer just talks for a while, just says some story. Your songs do that.
I like talking. The old recitations on records, usually they were more during the religious songs and stuff, but Hank Williams had, he recorded under the name of Luke the Drifter, and they were songs that had a moral to them. And they told the story, and you'd sing the chorus, and then go, and then so-and-so came down the road, and he showed up one day in his carpenter clothes, and you just start talking. And I found out that people kind of like it when I talk. So, you know, some people don't, some people would rather have you sing. My talking voice and my singing voice ain't too far apart.
Well, one of your maybe we can call it a religious song. Jesus, the Missing Years has
Right.
some great talking in it.
That was something I wrote really late at night. I didn't sing that for anybody for about a month. I'd put it away in a drawer, and I'd take it out and look at it and go, there might be something here, but I don't know. You know, it's kind of strange.
Oh, tell me the idea about behind that song.
Well, it was, I was in a voodoo shop in New Orleans. You know, it was a tourist place that sold different, supposedly mojo things and voodoo things. And I saw a pamphlet about the lost tablets of some name from the Bible. And I thumbed through it. I didn't buy the book. And I thought, I keep hearing about that Jesus had years that are totally unaccounted for. And I thought, how could a figure that big in mankind, nobody knew where he was for years and years. And I thought, well, if nobody knows that, I got just as good an idea as anybody. So I just came up with my own story, and unless somebody comes back from the dead and proves me wrong. Yeah.
Your story can stand.
Yeah.
What else was going on at home when you were growing up, John? Was it a house with books in it?
Oh, no, we had a really good set of encyclopedias that my dad probably was still paying on to the day he died. You know, I remember he used to, he really loved to prove himself right in political arguments and stuff. And you know, he'd be sitting in the kitchen drinking beer at night, and you'd hear him rustling through the encyclopedia. He wanted to make sure that he had his facts straight. So I guess that rubbed off on us, you know, more so than reading. Actually, come to think of it, when I was a kid in school, I liked to read. And I read throughout my teenage years. I'm just not much of a reader anymore, you know.
You don't mind a comic, though?
Oh, I love comic books. I like the colors of them, the pretty colors, you know. And like, there's nothing like a short, funny story in the middle of the day. You know, so I carry some comic books on the road with me.
Who's your favourite?
Archie and Jughead. And no, I don't like the television show. That's ridiculous. You know, there's nothing dark about Archie and Jughead.
What was your nickname at high school, John?
Oh, I had a couple of them. I had a girlfriend that she never called me John. She called me Jimmy. And I never corrected her because she was so pretty. I didn't care what she called me, as long as she called me. Yeah.
Is it true that you were called Tippy Toes too at some point?
I was a gymnast. My brother Doug, who I was talking about earlier, Doug was a gymnast. And it was kind of like my relationship with my brother Dave, who was the musician. Like, I walked in the kitchen one night and saw Dave playing a guitar for our dad. I didn't know any of my brothers had any musical talent. And when I saw that, I remember thinking, gee, I bet I could do that. And the same thing with gymnastics. When I saw my brother Doug doing it, I thought I could do that. Now, I had no physical ability whatsoever, but I worked really hard, and I became a champion side horse guy, at least in the state of Illinois. And it was all because I saw my brother do it.
That's an impressive skill, though. That takes a lot of strength, a lot of artistry.
If I would have had a brother that took up ballet, I'd be Rudolph Nureyev. Yeah.
Did that translate, that agility on the saddle horse, mean that you were a good dancer once you started going to dances?
I had to be to meet girls, yeah. But gymnastics I learned we had a great coach, and it has very little to do with strength. It's all balance, and you picture yourself, and you get a picture of yourself doing something in your mind, and you kind of find the center of yourself, and that's how you approach the apparatus. And because I used to see guys that were muscular trying to muscle their way through a routine on the rings or the parallel bars, and they had a lot of trouble. But if you got... I had a good picture of if anything I could picture myself doing, I could do.
This is Conversations with Sarah Konoski. Podcast, broadcast, and online.
John, how did you end up as a mechanic in the Army?
Well, I didn't. I got drafted. It was January of 1966, only about 6 months after LBJ had gone from 25,000 to 250,000 troops, supposedly in a conflict. It was not called a war, and they started drafting people left and right. And so the day I got drafted, about 4 of my buddies got drafted that day with me. And we went downtown Chicago to, they give you a physical of sorts. And then they put you in a room to take an aptitude test. Well, I didn't care for being in the Army, so I never opened up the question booklet. I took the answer thing and put A, B, C, D, B, B, C, C, B, B. And
this is a time-honoured approach to multiple choice tests.
Right. And they put it through their computer, and it came out that I was a mechanical genius. And actually, it might have saved me from going to Vietnam, because they ended up, on the last day of boot camp, when everybody got their orders to go overseas, about 80% of the guys who went to Vietnam. I got orders to Germany to be a heavy equipment mechanic in a construction outfit. I had never seen a piece of construction except driving by it on the street. I was working on 40-ton cranes and bulldozers. The good thing was the nuts and bolts were as big as your face. So I had a monkey wrench that was about 18 feet long in this truck I drove around. And if I could look in a book with one hand and work with the other, I could maybe fix a few things, but I was what I did is I made a lot of friends that knew what they were doing, and they would owe me favors, so they fixed the trucks for me.
So you spent a couple of years, 2 years in Germany?
2 years in Germany as a pseudo-mechanic, yeah.
And when you came back home, how different did America feel?
Very different. That would have been all of 66 and 67. I came back home, I grew up with a lot of guys that were... I guess we would call them greasers. They pompadours and sideburns and greased back hair. These guys, I came home and they all had bell bottoms and had their hair would look like the Beatles. It was really a different thing, And everybody, by that time, people who were never concerned about politics or anything, took sides on the Vietnam War, and also, when Martin Luther King the year I got out, both Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy got killed. That was huge. That was something, that you tell your grandkids about, because it really changed the country overnight. Like in my hometown, Maywood, the day after Martin Luther King got assassinated, that place was on fire for 3 days. Every storefront in Main Street was bashed out, and they replaced it with, not with glass, they replaced it with brick. They called it revolutionary architecture. Everybody had a steel door and and you couldn't go window shopping after that. So it was things changed pretty much overnight.
One of the songs on your debut album, Sam Stone, is about a Vietnam vet. Tell me about writing that song.
I think if I remember correctly, story-wise, I'd heard from my buddies. Like I say, a bunch of us got drafted at the same time, so we got out around the same time. And the ones that went to Vietnam all came home injured in ways that you wouldn't expect somebody to come home from combat. I had one buddy tell me that he was in a non-combat part of Vietnam. He said, but it didn't matter. He says, you'd be going for a beer at night with three buddies and somebody'd step on a landmine. He goes, and it was just enough to keep everybody on edge all the time. And there was loads of drugs there to while away your time while you're wondering if you're going to be blown up or not. And they all just seemed so distant and totally different, the guys that came home from there. And I was trying to explain to myself what was so different, and that's how that coupled with, I saw a thing on the news, the TV news around, I guess, 68 or so, where some soldiers were returning through San Francisco from Vietnam. And there was a bunch of protesters at the airport, and they were spitting on the soldiers. And I thought that was really odd. I thought they should be blaming the people in Washington, not the guys that go over and fight for you, And I thought there needed to be a song sticking up for the soldier, but also explaining why the soldier's so screwed up. And that's kind of what I was shooting for.
How did it go over the first time you played that song? What kind of reaction?
I had some people cried. Some people just sat there. They didn't applaud. They just looked at me. And usually I would introduce my songs with a humorous story before I'd get, especially the heavier the song was, the more humorous story I would lead into it with it, because I didn't know how to be a performer, but I thought you shouldn't walk up and get behind the microphone and just bring people down. You ought to at least
give them a joke first.
Tell them a joke first, and then hit them over the head with your heavy song. Yeah. And it was really different. Mainly I got silence, but people I don't think they believed what they heard. So they just sat there looking at me, and they slowly started applauding. And after about 2 weeks of me coming down and singing at the open stage, I wasn't trying to get a job, but the owner of the club offered me a job. And I said, well, I got a job. I deliver the mail. And he said, no, singing here. And I said, you're kidding me. And he said, no. And he told me how long I had to sing. And I went home and wrote enough songs to, fill up the rest of the time.
Not so different from right now, I guess, that you're being put in your hotel room to write your songs.
Exactly.
When Johnny Cash wanted to sing that song, Sandstone, how did he change it?
John always wanted to sing that song he told me from the first time he heard it, but he always had trouble with the line, Jesus Christ died for nothing, I suppose. And I started to explain to him, forgetting he was Johnny Cash, and he says, I know what you're saying. And I said, well, it seemed to me that the whole thing with Vietnam, I wanted to capture the hopelessness of it. And I couldn't think of anything more hopeless than Jesus Christ dying for nothing. And that's why it's in there. But John had just him and June had been to the Holy Land, and they'd written a book called The Man in White. And he said his fans, wouldn't understand him singing that line. So I said, listen, I can't change it because it's the heart of the song. But if you wanted to change it, I said, that'd be fine with me. And so we'd had a conversation about his dad. And that's why he replaced the line with, Daddy must have hurt a lot back then, I suppose.
I guess if Johnny Cash wants to sing your song, you kind of got to be flexible.
Well, he was like Abraham Lincoln to me. And I mean, and just to be in his presence, John was, and a lot of people probably don't know, he's a real fun-loving guy. He wasn't all that serious like he is on TV, you know. He was just like a real scamp, you know, but he was just a great guy. But I always felt like yes sir, no sir around him. I never felt like I could just be, you know. Kris Kristofferson was responsible for introducing me to most of my musical heroes. Johnny Cash and Gordon Lightfoot and Merle Haggard, you know. Chris always came through.
How did you first meet Kris Kristofferson?
I was playing at a club called the Earl of Old Town in Chicago, and Steve Goodman, my good buddy, he was playing there too. Things were just really busting wide open for Chris. This was his first record, and Chris was the big violin singer-songwriters, and rightfully so. And Goodman got the opening slot, and so they played 4 nights, and every night Steve Goodman would try and get Chris over to see his buddy John. And Chris wasn't having none of it. And the last night, Goodman just dug in. So Chris finally got in a cab, 2 a.m. on a Sunday evening. I'm waiting around for my paycheck. The chairs were on the table. The waitresses were mopping the floor. And Chris walks in, sits down at the table right in front of the microphone. And I get up on stage and do a show just for him. I sang 7 songs. I got down, Chris bought me a beer and said, would you get up there and sing those 7 songs again and anything else you got? And he was just my biggest fan from then on, and what a person to have to be a fan of your songwriting.
Were these songs, John, that you'd written while you were making your deliveries as a mailman in Chicago?
There's nothing much to do on it. Once you know you're on the right street as a mailman. I mean, I remember I delivered mail once on the wrong street to about 200 houses, and I had to go back at night and knock on the doors, ask for the mail back. So after that, I made sure I was always on the right street.
Did you bring like a notepad or pen with you, or just kept it in your mind?
I never committed lyrics to paper until I was sure that was where it was. And then I wanted to go on to something else. So I'd finally write it down to see what it looked like. But I just kept it in my mind. I'd be working on 2 and 3 songs at a time. But like I say, it was my hobby then. See, now it's my work. And when I hear the word work, I run the other way. So that's why I'm not so anxious to write a song every day.
Well, with the help of friends like Kris Kristofferson and others, you put out your debut album, which has this song, Paradise, that you mentioned before,
right,
about this place in Kentucky where your family were from. How did your dad respond when he first heard that song?
Well, I had sang it for him when I first wrote it. I wanted him to know I was a songwriter. So I figured if I put him in, told his story, and put him in the song, he'd have to listen to it. But when I went off to do a record, that would have been the summer of 1971, I went down to Memphis, recorded with Elvis's band. I went from being a mailman to recording with Elvis Presley's band. And I came back home, and somebody lent us a tape recorder and played him the record. Paradise was the last song on it. And he got up before the song played. He listened to the whole rest of the record in the room with me. And when Paradise started, he walked into the dining room and sat by himself in the dark. And when it was done, he came back in. And I said, "What'd you leave the room for?" He said, "I wanted to pretend it was on the jukebox."
I guess that was a way of saying it's a proper song. It's a real song.
I got a feeling he shed a tear or two. He didn't want me to see him cry.
After this album and a few others, your career took off and you moved to Nashville, as you were saying. Tell me about this sort of life you were leading in Nashville in the 1980s. What kind of hours were you keeping back then?
I was sleeping all day and rocking all night. I was a bachelor. Actually, I just got into my second marriage, which was a lot more brief than my first one. My first one lasted 13 years. But I got to Nashville, and man, I'd been married since I was 19. So this was a big chance for me. I was in my 30s, and here I was in the city I loved, and country music all around me. And I was already settled in to where I did for a living. I could live in Podunk, Idaho, and been John Prine. But it was thrilling for me to be in Nashville, and I tried to take it all in at once. I mean, that's why I got my sleep during the day, so I could be fresh all night.
You used to do a bit of cooking for friends late at night.
Oh, I'd have dinner would be served between midnight and 1 o'clock at my house. So my buddies, when the clubs would close, they didn't even call and ask. They just knew I had dinner going.
What were you cooking?
Oh, usually pot roast or fried chicken. So anything my mom was good at cooking, I'd serve up my version of it. And I never started cooking till about 8 at night, so that's why dinner was never ready till midnight.
I think you kept tropical fish as well. Sean, what happened to those fish one night when you were out?
But, okay, let me try and tell a short version of what happened. It was my 30th birthday. About 200 people came. We roasted a pig in the backyard, and it became like a luau happy birthday party. I invited Johnny Cash to that. I found a note from him not long ago saying he'd love to come and attend the party, but would mean he would have to leave his house. He sent me a bowl of chili for a birthday present. But 200 people showed up, and we told them not to bring gifts, but people bring them anyway. One of the gifts was one of those goldfish you win in a carnival, and it's usually dead by the time you get home. It was attached to a hat.
What do you mean it was attached to a hat?
It's in a goldfish bowl, a plastic goldfish bowl that's attached to the top of a hat. Somebody thought I needed something like that in order to continue my lifestyle. But about 2 days later, I remember after everybody had finally cleared out and gone home, this part of the long one, I was laying in bed and I thought, oh my God, there's a live goldfish in that pile of presents somewhere. So I went out and bought the smallest container of food, like a thimble, thinking this thing will be dead by Friday. Well, he not only lived, but he lived for another month or so, and people started thinking I liked goldfish. So they'd bring other goldfish to play with this goldfish. And then a guy gave me a big tank that he had in his garage that he wanted to get rid of. And it turned out to be a tropical fish tank. I didn't know this. And so by that time, I had about 11 goldfish, and I didn't know, but, you put them, the bigger tank you put them in, they'll grow. And if you keep them in a small one, they won't. I didn't know this. You learn like you earn. So one night, this girl from Memphis had come to visit, and we were in Nashville, and I said, I'll be ready in a minute. And she said, why? She says, your goldfish are awfully active tonight. And I said, oh, they know it's Saturday night too, right? We go out, come home about 2:30 in the morning. The goldfish are all dead. The heating element had gone berserk and killed them, boiled them alive. So I started flushing them down the toilet. I thought it was the humane thing to do. And one of them, rigor mortis, had sit in and he wouldn't go down the toilet. So I wrapped him in silver foil, and I put him in the freezer, and went on the road the next day. Came home about a month later, and when I'm going through my freezer, and I find this fish. And I figured, I can't throw them in the garbage now, just do that after keeping them frozen. Took him to a taxidermist way out in the country. And at the time, I didn't have any children. I was, like I say, kind of my bachelor days. I pulled this goldfish out, and the guy's got nothing but moose and deer on the wall. And I lay it down, and he looks at it, and he looks up at me, and I said, the kids miss him. So to this day, I have that fish in my bar at home, and that's what it says below. It says, the kids miss him.
Well, how did things change for you, John, after you met Fiona and you guys had kids?
Order came to my life. I guess Fiona must have looked at me and thought, this guy needs fixing. If I've ever seen anybody that needs some order in his life. So, we quickly had a family, and it was really great. It was nothing I really experienced before to have order in my life.
You've written great songs about marriage. You've also written great songs about divorce. Which is easier to write about?
Divorce. As my good friend Steve Goodman said, the reason there's better songs about heartbreak is because when you're going through that, you got all the time in the world to sit around and feel sorry for yourself or write a song about it. But when things are going good in a relationship, it's the last thing you want to do is stop and go, let's write a song about how great things are, you know.
When you went to see a doctor back in 1996, John, what did he tell you?
I noticed while I was shaving, I had this ever so slight lump on my neck. And I didn't think much of it, but it didn't go away. And then it started to go away, and then it came back even worse. Now, it wasn't visible, really, to the eye. So I mentioned it to a doctor of mine who also, just said, oh, that's nothing. And I looked in on a little more. I wanted to go see. I said, it just didn't seem right. I felt fine. I felt good. And never thinking it was cancer. But when I finally went, I went to a voice doctor because I was concerned about about the lump, and also my throat had been kind of scratchy. And he knew what it was right away. Next thing I knew, he had 8 doctors in the room, all looking down my throat. And these were like interns and stuff. He wanted them to know what this looked like. And they sent me, and Fiona was with me, and they sent us over across the street. It was a Friday night, almost closing time, to see another doctor, a doctor that wanted to do surgery 2 days later on me. And I thought, well, this is going too fast. I need to settle down. I think it's the most difficult time for most people that are diagnosed with cancer. That you want to make sure you got the right doctor.
What kind of treatment did you have to get?
I had the surgery where they took a big scoop out of my neck because the cancer had already spread to a bunch of nodes over there, and they had to get rid of all of those. And they found the primary that was at the bottom of my tongue. They don't have to do that anymore. I found out they handle it all with radiation and chemo now. They don't have to do the radical surgery. And I remember my buddy Steve Goodman. Steve died of leukemia. He had radical chemotherapy about the whole time I knew him. We'd be on the road together, and he'd have to drive to the nearest hospital and get a bunch of chemo. He acted like it was nothing to it, you know. But I saw what he went through with that. And I just didn't want the chemotherapy. I said, I want you to go and do your surgery, come back and tell me I don't have cancer anymore. And I said, now I'll take care of the rest of it. They were concerned about, because I was a singer, trying to save my vocal cords. And I said, hey, I couldn't sing in the first place. I said, I had to make it all up. You know, I said, I just talk. And then at the end of a sentence, I go, I take the word out as far as I can so people know it's the end of a thought.
How was it to sing again after you'd finished your treatment?
It took a while because it was mainly I just didn't have the strength to sing. It was what it was. And slowly, Fiona made sure that I, pick up a guitar and try and sing every once in a while. And it took about a year before, and also like your confidence factor, you don't know what's going to happen when you open your mouth to sing, especially in front of people. So we booked a show over in eastern Tennessee near Bristol. Bristol's half in Tennessee and half in West Virginia. We booked a show over there, and we figured, well, if it goes awful, maybe it'll take a long time before anybody finds out about it. But there was about 800 people there, and I sang. I bet I sang half the songs I ever wrote. As long as it was going good, I kept singing. And afterwards, we stayed, and I met every single person, shook hands with them afterwards. And I was back on the track again. That's the only break I've ever had from singing in 47 years. Yeah.
Right from your first album, John, you were writing songs about getting old, and you've got songs about that on this album. Is it different than you expected it was going to be back at 23?
Yeah. Between my ears, I'm 19. I am not 72 years old. I can't remember meeting a 72-year-old when I was a kid that was anything like me. But sometimes when I pass by a mirror, I go, well, you might be. You're losing your hair. And you got all these lines and everything. But I'm not sure why, right from the beginning when I started writing, that the elderly or growing old was so important to me. Other than I was very close to both sets of my grandparents. They were great, great people. They were from another time and era. And I just have nothing but fond memories of all of them. So I'm thinking maybe that might be part of it, and I think I just kind of developed through my mother and father an empathy for older people, that they were necessary. They were very necessary. If you wanted to know where you were going, you had to learn where they'd been.
The way you write about heaven on this album, on the Tree of Forgiveness, it sounds like a pretty fun place.
Well, if I'm going to go there, I'm going to make sure it's fun.
What do you want to have happen at the John Prine heaven? What's in store?
Well, I'm not going to have a bunch of people sing mediocre religious songs in white robes standing by a river. I'm going to get a drink and check into a really nice hotel and start a rock and roll band.
Have a pig in the spit, and maybe Johnny Cash will come to the party this time.
Maybe I'll just get another bowl of chili for him.
John, it's been such a treat talking to you. Thank you so much for coming onto Conversations.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
You've been listening to my conversation with John Prine, recorded in 2019 during his last Australian tour. John passed away in 2020 from complications from COVID. This conversation was produced on the lands of the Gadigal, Yagara and Turrbal peoples. The producer was Michelle Ransom-Hughes. Our executive producer is Carmel Rooney. I'm Sarah Konoski. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to a podcast of Conversations with Sarah Konoski. For more Conversations interviews, head to the website abc.net.au/conversations.